and it's hard to follow breakdancing. So I'll do my best. So my name is Lisa Congdon, and I am an artist and an illustrator. And let's see. Do I press the arrow button?
Arrow, yeah.
Okay, it's a screenshot of the homepage of my website, lisacongdon.com. And I also keep a daily blog called Today is Going to Be Awesome, where I write about my work, my inspiration, my process. I interview other artists. I write about my life and that sort of idea that I'm demystifying what the life of a working artist is for people who read my blog. This is a picture of my studio, which is in Oakland. I just moved to Oakland in February from San Francisco, where I'd lived for 23 years. I love it here, so I'm really excited. I share my studio space with CCA alum Jamie Basta, who's painting glitter. And we have this huge space at the High Street Locks. And most of my work is illustration, which I'll talk about in a minute. So a lot of the times I'm sitting at one of my smaller tables, working really small, but I also make larger paintings, and I work mostly figured representationally, but sometimes I do abstract work as well. So this is just sort of a sampling of my work. I work mostly, as I said, in illustration, from book illustration, like book covers, book interiors. I'm publishing a couple of my own books that come out next year. I also do editorial work for magazines and newspapers. I do a lot of work for the San Francisco Bay Guardian. And I also do surface design, which I'll show you a few samples of in a moment, like textiles, wallpaper, journals, note cards, art licensing. I work in a variety of mediums. Ink, gouache, graphite are the main. I do some digital work as well, especially for the repeat patterns that I do for surface design. I specialize in hand lettering, so a lot of the work that I get, the illustration work I get, comes from the hand lettering work that I do. I have a book of hand lettering that comes out this spring, Chronicle Books. So, so another slide, you can see some of the middle image is one of the wallpaper patterns. I have 3 patterns that are out through this company called Bailey & West. And then other patterns that I've done for other companies in textiles and other, lots of things in kids' bedding and all kinds of things. The most notable thing about me is that I am self-taught, and I didn't even pick up a paintbrush until I was about 31 or 32 years old. I am 45, so it's been like 13 or 14 years since I started, which was back in the dark ages of 2001. I was working as a project manager at a nonprofit organization in the Bay Area. I worked in education. I was originally an elementary school teacher in San Francisco in a high poverty school, and then I went to work for a nonprofit organization that worked in high poverty schools in the Bay Area. And there was something that didn't feel fulfilled in my life, and so I took an art class for fun. And I sort of became obsessed with painting, drawing, and collage. And so in the privacy of my own apartment, set up shop, basically, on my kitchen table. And no one really knew what I did. I think some friends who came over sort of saw that I was playing around. So about 4 years later, in about 2005, after a lot of experimentation and a lot of practice, and I continued to take classes, I eventually began sharing my work on the internet. The internet is a beautiful thing for people who didn't go to school or didn't have any connections or formal training. And I started a blog, which is different than the blog I have now, and I joined Flickr, which I think is like the website. And I started sharing the work that I did, and I had zero intention of becoming a working artist, making my living as an artist. I really was just making stuff and having a lot of fun at it. I was still working full time. And then all of a sudden I started getting emails like, oh, would you like to be in this show, or I saw your work, where can I buy it? And so for about 2 years, between 2005 and 2007, I started to show my work in mostly very small galleries and some shops, local shops, and then eventually across the country and in New York. In 2007, I opened an Etsy shop. This is back when Etsy was a pretty new phenomenon. And around 2007, I was sort of in a position similar to, where other artists who've talked today, I could leave my job. So I left my job, and I was struggling a lot at first. So there's this period where you go out on your own that might take a few years, where you're sort of still working really hard and trying to figure out what works. And that was a hard period of time. But in 2008, I signed with an illustration agent, and this sort of happened, interestingly, I had no aspiration to become an illustrator. I actually sort of saw myself as a fine artist, but that's where the work was, and so I started doing it. And I was doing more gallery shows, more illustration work, and started to make a steady income. And so today, here I am. Let's see. So I make most of my living doing illustration. This is actually quite a short list of some of my clients. Everything from big companies like Hewlett-Packard and big publishers like HarperCollins and Trader Joe's to and the New York MoMA, a recent client of mine, to smaller things like San Francisco Bay Guardian, and a local publisher, Chronicle Books, has been a major client of mine. So super fun jobs. I really love being an illustrator. I also have an Etsy shop, as I mentioned, and I sell anywhere from 10 to 40 prints a week in my shop. It took me several years to get to the point where I was making regular sales. And I was just telling somebody earlier that having an online shop is a great way to make passive income. Once you made the piece of art, you can sell either limited edition prints or open edition prints of your work. I also make and sell fine art. I work with various galleries. I worked with Gallery Hijinks in San Francisco, had a solo show there when they were in San Francisco, Michael Rosenthal Gallery. I was even in a show at the Contemporary Jewish Museum. Worked a lot with Southern Exposure, which is a great organization and resource for emerging artists. I was on the board of directors there for several years. I show at the QV Gallery here in Oakland, Land Gallery in Portland, and then I've been starting to show at Bedford Gallery at the Lesher Center for the Arts in Walnut Creek, and Colot in Berkeley, which is another great nonprofit. So as you can see, my income comes from majority from illustration, but my Etsy shop is sort of my bread and butter, my regular income, because I can really count on those sales. And then the for fun for me is my fine art practice. And some people sort of tailor their art practice to one particular mode of income. For me, I found that it's a lot easier to diversify and try to, it's also way more interesting when you're selling your work and making different kinds of work, or selling your work in different ways and making different kinds of work. This is a graphic that I made recently, and I feel like it sort of exemplifies how I approach what I do. One of the things that motivates me me is that I spent the first 15 years of my adult life really sort of unfulfilled and bored. And I had a great job. I worked at this nonprofit. I was doing good work in the world, but there was this part of me that obviously I sort of randomly took an art class and figured out that I needed to be an artist. But previous to that, I had no idea that I had any of that laid inside of me. And so gratitude is sort of what gets me going every day and has a lot to do with why I get out of bed every morning. Because I spent a lot of time in my 20s and 30s, you know, getting up every day and doing stuff that I didn't feel as motivated to do. And I feel like part of why I've been successful is because I'm doing what I love, and that I've also worked really hard to make it my life's work. So while I sort of like accidentally took an art class, while I was bored at my job and it ended up becoming my career, once I realized that it was what I loved to do and what I needed to do every day, I sort of approached it with a lot of intentionality, which means, you know, trying to approach my art practice as a business and really figure out, you know, what are all the things that I need to do in order to make it my living. And the internet is a great level playing field for artists now. It used to be that you had to graduate from a prestigious school and sign with a gallery or get an illustration agent in order to make it, and I feel like there's so much more opportunity now for people, even people like me who have no training and no connections when they were starting out. All of the things that come with being a working artist can be really exhausting, but it's a lot of hard work, and this is all talking about all of it is really hard in 10 minutes. But my advice to you is do what you love and make what you are.